The obsidian throne, the crystalline halls of the Nexus Prime, stretched endlessly into shadow. Empress Vexandra of the Zephyrian Dominion sat upon her throne of living obsidian, her 4 arms draped in ceremonial chains that pulsed with dark energy. For 3 centuries, she had ruled over 47 star systems with an iron fist, crushing rebellions before they could even form thoughts of freedom. Her telepathic abilities were legendary throughout the galaxy. She could read minds across entire solar systems, bending the will of billions to her command. The Zephyrian guards who surrounded her throne were not there by choice, but by mental compulsion, their free will stripped away long ago. Lieutenant Marcus Kane of the Terran Special Forces crouched in the ventilation shaft above the throne room, his breathing controlled and silent. He had volunteered for this suicide mission, knowing that Earth's freedom depended on someone reaching the heart of the Dominion. The war had raged for 5 years, with humanity losing ground on every front. Marcus carried a single EMP grenade, specially designed to disrupt psychic energy fields. Intelligence suggested that destroying the Empress's psychic crown would temporarily sever her connection to the vast network of enslaved minds across the galaxy. It might give humanity the opening they desperately needed. The Empress suddenly stiffened, her violet eyes scanning the ornate ceiling. Her mental probes swept the chamber like searchlights, seeking the foreign presence she sensed. Marcus held his breath, pressing himself against the cold metal of the shaft. His mind was shielded by experimental neural dampeners, but he knew they wouldn't hold forever. "Show yourself, little insect," Vexandra's voice echoed through the chamber, though her lips never moved. The words formed directly in Marcus's mind, accompanied by waves of crushing mental pressure. "I can smell your defiance from here." Marcus gritted his teeth and pulled the pin from his grenade. He had one chance, one moment to change the course of galactic history. The Empress's attention was focused on the wrong section of the ceiling, giving him a precious few seconds. He dropped through the grate like a falling star, the grenade leaving his hand as he plummeted toward the throne. Time seemed to slow as Vexandra's 4 eyes widened in surprise and fury. Her psychic scream shattered several of the crystal pillars, but it was too late. The EMP grenade detonated in a blinding flash of blue light. The obsidian throne cracked and crumbled, sending the Empress tumbling to the floor. Her crown, a delicate structure of crystallized thought energy, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The psychic network that had enslaved billions suddenly went. Silent. Marcus crashed into the rubble beside the fallen throne, his body broken, but his mission complete. As darkness claimed his vision, he heard something impossible. The Empress was crying. Beneath the rubble, the silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in centuries, Empress Vexandra could not hear the thoughts of her subjects. Constant mental chatter that had filled her mind since childhood was gone, replaced by an emptiness that felt like death itself. She lay pinned beneath chunks of her shattered throne, her left arm crushed and her ceremonial robes torn. Silver. Blood seeped from dozens of cuts, pooling on the cracked marble floor. Around her, the Zephyrian guards stood motionless, their minds suddenly free from her control for the first time in decades. Some fled immediately, their feet carrying them toward exits they had never been allowed to use. Others simply stood in confusion, unsure what to do with their newfound freedom. A few approached their fallen Empress, but not to help. They looked down at her with expressions of dawning hatred and understanding. Marcus Kane lay buried under a pile of crystal debris, his breathing shallow and labored. His left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. Yet somehow he was still alive, still conscious enough to watch as the Empress dragged herself toward him. "You destroyed everything," Vexandra whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. Each word was a struggle, spoken aloud since her telepathic Abilities had been severed. 3 centuries of order, of peace under my rule, gone. Marcus managed a weak smile, despite the pain. Not peace. Control. There's a difference. The Empress paused, her violet eyes studying the human soldier. She had expected rage, defiance, or fear. Instead, she found something she had never encountered in all her years of ruling. Pity. This broken human, this enemy who had brought down her empire, looked at her with genuine sadness rather than hatred. "You don't understand," she continued, pulling herself closer despite the agony in her crushed limbs. "Without my guidance, without my control, there will be chaos. Systems will tear themselves apart. Billions will die in the wars that follow." "Maybe," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper, "but they'll die free. And those who survive will live free too. That's worth the risk." For the first time in her long life, Vexandra felt the weight of doubt. She had always believed that her rule was necessary, that her subjects were too primitive and chaotic to govern themselves. But this human, this insignificant creature from a backwater planet, had shown her something different. He had risked everything not for conquest or revenge, but for an ideal she had never truly understood. The Empress reached out with her remaining good hand, placing it gently on Marcus's chest. Through the physical contact, she could sense his thoughts more clearly than ever before. There was no hatred there, no desire for her death. Instead, she found hope, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the fundamental right of all beings to choose their own destiny. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "Thank you for showing me what I had forgotten." Marcus's eyes widened in surprise, but before he could respond, the Empress was already working to free him from the rubble. The unexpected alliance news of the Empress's fall spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On dozens of worlds, newly freed populations erupted in celebration or descended into chaos. Some systems immediately declared independence, while others found themselves caught in brutal civil wars as different factions struggled for control in the ruins of the throne room. Vexandra worked tirelessly to keep Marcus alive. Her knowledge of Zephyrian healing techniques, combined with salvaged medical equipment from the palace infirmary, was all that stood between the human soldier and death. She had never performed such delicate work with her own hands before, having always relied on telepathic manipulation of others. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked during one of his brief moments of consciousness. The Empress had managed to set his broken leg and stop the worst of the bleeding, but infection was setting in. "Because you were right," Vexandra replied, her voice still uncertain as she spoke aloud. "I spent so long controlling others that I forgot what it meant to choose. You gave me back my choice, and I choose to save you." 3 days passed before the first rescue ships arrived. The Terran fleet, led by Captain Jennifer Rodriguez, had come expecting to find Marcus's body and begin the long process of liberating Zephyrian space. Instead, they found something unprecedented, a human soldier being tended by the former Empress herself. "Stand down, Your Majesty," Captain Rodriguez commanded, her weapon drawn as she entered the ruined throne room. "Step away from our soldier." Vexandra raised her hands slowly, silver blood still staining her fingers. "I mean him no harm. I have been caring for him since the explosion. He needs proper medical attention immediately." The rescue team's medic, Dr. Thomas Wright, quickly assessed Marcus's condition. "She's right, Captain. Without this treatment, he would have died days ago. The surgical work here is remarkable." As Marcus was carefully loaded onto a stretcher, he reached out and grasped the Empress's hand. "Come with us," he whispered. "Help us build something better." Vexandra stared at the offered hand, torn between fear and hope. Around them, the palace continued to crumble as automated systems failed and the last of her loyal guards abandoned their posts. She had lost everything she had ever known, but perhaps that was exactly what she needed. "I accept," she said, taking Marcus's hand, "but I want asylum. I want to help rebuild what I destroyed." Captain Rodriguez lowered her weapon slowly. "That's not my decision to make, Your Majesty. But if you're sincere about wanting to help, then we'll let Earth's government decide." As the rescue ship lifted off from the dying palace, Vexandra caught her first glimpse of the stars without the filter of her psychic crown. They seemed brighter somehow, more beautiful than she had ever noticed. For the first time in centuries, she felt truly free. The journey to Earth would take weeks, giving her time to learn what it meant to be just another being in the universe rather than its ruler. The path to redemption, the trial of Empress Vexandra, became the most watched event in galactic history. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered on Earth to witness the proceedings, many demanding her immediate execution for crimes against sentient life. The former Empress sat calmly in the defendant's chair, her regal bearing intact despite the simple clothing she now wore. Marcus Kane, still recovering from his injuries, testified on her behalf. "Your Honors, I went to that throne room to stop a tyrant, but I found something else entirely. I found someone who had lost her way, but was willing to find it again. The Empress didn't just spare my life. She saved it, knowing full well that I was her enemy." The prosecution, led by Attorney General Patricia Voss, was relentless. The defendant's actions, regardless of recent behavior, cannot be forgiven. She enslaved billions, crushed entire civilizations, and ruled through fear and mind control. Her assistance to Lieutenant Kane, while admirable, has not erased centuries of suffering. Vexandra requested to speak in her own defense, a right that surprised many who expected her to maintain her silence. "I do not ask for forgiveness," she began, her voice carrying across the packed courtroom. "I ask for the chance to make amends. I cannot undo the harm I have caused, but I can spend whatever time I have left helping to heal the wounds I inflicted." The Empress presented a detailed plan for galactic reconstruction. Her intimate knowledge of the Dominion's infrastructure, combined with her understanding of the affected world's needs, could accelerate the rebuilding process by decades. She offered to work without compensation, under constant supervision. Until her death, Judge William Chun, presiding over the tribunal, faced an impossible decision. Justice demanded punishment for her crimes, but the galaxy's practical needs argued for her expertise. "The court will recess for deliberation," he announced after 3 days of testimony. During the recess, Marcus visited Vexandra in her secure quarters. She sat by the window, watching Earth's sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Giving up your power?" "Every day," she replied honestly. "But not because I miss ruling. I regret the centuries I wasted, the lives I destroyed through my ignorance. Power corrupted me so completely that I convinced myself slavery was mercy." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother used to say that the hardest person to forgive is yourself. But maybe that's exactly what you need to learn to do." When the tribunal reconvened, Judge Chun delivered a verdict that shocked everyone present. The defendant is guilty of crimes against sentient life. However, given her cooperation and the unique circumstances of her case, this court sentences her to life imprisonment with the possibility of supervised release contingent upon her continued assistance in galactic reconstruction efforts. Vexandra bowed her head in acceptance. "I am grateful for this opportunity to serve rather than simply survive." The Empress was transported to a minimum security facility on Europa, where she began her new life as a consultant for the Galactic Reconstruction Authority. Her days were filled with detailed planning sessions, infrastructure assessments, and careful coordination with the leaders of formerly enslaved worlds. Marcus visited her regularly, their unlikely friendship growing stronger with each passing month. Together, they worked to ensure that the power vacuum left by the Dominion's collapse would be filled by democratic institutions rather than new tyrants. A new beginning 5 years after the fall of the Dominion, the galaxy had begun to heal. The Galactic Reconstruction Authority, guided by Vexandra's expertise and Marcus's moral compass, had successfully established democratic governments on 43 of the formerly enslaved worlds. Trade routes had been reopened, refugee populations had been resettled, and the threat of large-scale war had been largely eliminated. Vexandra had earned her supervised release after 3 years of exemplary service. She now lived in a small apartment in Geneva, working as a civilian consultant for the United Nations Interstellar Affairs Division. Her former subjects had mixed reactions to her freedom, but most acknowledged that her contributions to the reconstruction effort had been invaluable. Marcus, now promoted to colonel and serving as the military liaison to the Reconstruction Authority, found himself spending more and more time with the former Empress. Their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, though both were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries given their history. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't dropped that grenade?" Marcus asked one evening as they reviewed development proposals for the Kepler 442 system. Vexandra paused in her work, considering the question carefully. "I think I would have died eventually, probably violently, and taken billions with me. Tyranny always collapses. Eventually, but the cost of waiting is usually measured in the suffering of the innocent." She turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting the light of Earth's moon. "You gave me something I never expected to receive, a second chance. Not just at life, but at being worthy of it." Marcus smiled, remembering the broken ruler he had found in the rubble of her throne room. "You've more than earned it. The schools you've helped establish, the trade agreements you've negotiated, the conflicts you've prevented. You've probably saved more lives than you ever took." "Perhaps," she replied softly, "but I will carry the weight of those I couldn't, save for the rest of my days. It's a burden I gladly bear, if it means I never forget the cost of absolute power." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Reconstruction Authority. A new crisis was developing in the Vega system, where competing factions were threatening to tear apart a fragile peace treaty. The situation required immediate attention from someone with diplomatic experience and intimate knowledge of the region's history. "Looks like we're needed again," Marcus said, already reaching for his travel bag. Vexandra nodded, gathering her own belongings. Then, "We should go. There are still worlds to heal, still people to help." As their transport lifted off from Earth, carrying them toward another crisis that would test their partnership, both understood that their work was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and the scars left by centuries of tyranny would take generations to fully heal. But for the first time in either of their lives, they faced the future with hope rather than fear. The human soldier who had shattered an empire, and the Empress who had thanked him for it, continued their unlikely alliance, proving that even the most bitter enemies could become the most trusted allies when united by a common cause. In the depths of space, their ship carried them toward new challenges and new opportunities to build a better galaxy, one world at a time.